Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Analytical Line. I'm Josh Davis. As always, thank you for joining me. Today, I'm going to talk about every single team in March Madness, give you my quick preview, everything I know. I've been watching too much college basketball this season, spending probably too many hours on CBB Analytics, and now it's for this week and the next few weeks, the best time in sports of the entire year. It's March Madness. We have a bracket. As you can see here, I got 3 brackets that I've filled out online, and these are the first 3 ones that I've made as of Monday morning. This is what I've done. And I have a main bracket, a bracket that has my favorite upsets and also my favorite top seeds going all the way. I have a chaos bracket, which is a bunch of upsets, the teams that I think are the most volatile, teams that maybe are the most risky but have a lot of potential and that could go on and make a big run. And then I got my chalky bracket that's got Duke winning it all. It's got a lot of the top teams, a couple upsets sprinkled in, but that's a bracket that's just supposed to be really solid, and if this tournament ends up being pretty boring, that one will do well. There's absolutely no reason for you to follow what I'm doing, but you can listen to the information I give, the reasons I give for the teams I'm picking, and hopefully you can get some information out of this. I'm going to talk about my main bracket here and just go through all the teams. First off, you got Duke Siena. Duke is the best team in the country by so many metrics. They got Cameron Boozer, Isaiah Evans, a whole plethora of wonderful guards. Coach Scheyer is so smart. It always astounds me how well he knows what the other team's doing, but several coaches can be able to understand the other team's play styles and what they want to do on the court. Coach Scheyer takes that to another level and says, I can then execute my own squad perfectly against that. The in-game adjustments, the consistency of being willing to change things up and never being scared to go away from their status quo. This is not a Coach K Duke team anymore. This is Coach Scheyer, and he's doing things differently with the same levels of success. If you're willing to pick a favorite to win it all, this is the team that I would do to do it. Duke is the best team in the country. They've consistently won the big games all year. They've slipped up at times when they've had some young freshmen making some mistakes, committing some turnovers, some tough games when they went to UNC and stuff like that. But this is the best team in the country. And yes, this tournament is difficult, but I expect them to do very well throughout this tournament. What's interesting here, though, is the next matchup. Number 8, number 9, Ohio State versus TCU. These are 2 very hot teams, 2 teams that have been very hit or miss throughout this season, but have been very hit lately so far in March, especially in their conference tournaments, especially towards the end of the regular season. Bruce Thornton broke the scoring record for Ohio State. He's one of the best players in Buckeye history. And then you got a couple of star forwards for TCU leading the way as they're an extremely strong defensive team out of the Big 12. This is one of the most exciting matchups of the first round. I could see either of these teams knocking off each other and then Duke and potentially making a run. But at the same time, both of these teams have tough matchups. I could not tell you who's going to win that game. As you can see in this bracket, I have Ohio State. I think in my other 2 brackets, I have TCU. And I think I have Duke beating them in every single one in all 3 brackets. But man, you could really see TCU making a run if their shooting is able to continue at the level they've been going at. Down here, I got St. John's and Northern Iowa. It was really interesting. The CBS broadcast missed the Northern Iowa reaction to them being in the tournament. St. John's, of course, had a really tough tournament last year, losing really early. I actually picked St. John's to win it all last year in my main bracket. That was rough. I'm not forgetting that. I'm not going to pick them to go as far this year. They have a tough draw with UNI and then probably Kansas or CA Baptist up next, and then a meeting with Duke as I have them predicted to get to here. I think St. John's is a really good basketball team. They don't have a ton of weaknesses, but they also don't have a ton of reasons for me to believe that they're special in this tournament. Kansas is a really fun team. They always seem to do well in the tournament. Darren Peterson's one of the best players in the country. He's been in the limelight a lot this season for a variety of reasons, whether it's team chemistry or freshman issues or what have you. But this team is extremely talented, and they have all of the tools they need to make a run in March. Louisville, South Florida. This is another one of the more interesting games at the beginning of this tournament. Louisville has some injury issues, and we have no idea what we're getting out of Mikal Brown, whether he's going to play or not. He missed the ACC tournament, but he's one of the best players in the country, and we've seen Louisville at their best when they had wins against Kentucky, Indiana, destroyed NC State just last month. This is an extremely talented team when they're at their best, but I'm not sure that if Brown's going to play. Nobody does. As you can see here, they're 7-5 without Brown. They're 16-5 with him. They're one of the highest three-point shooting teams in the country, I believe only behind Alabama. So this team is going to shoot the rock, and if they have Brown, I expect those shots to go in. South Florida, on the other hand, is an extremely good all-around team. And they're one of those teams that I really think could make a run in this tournament. If they get past Louisville and they avoid the three-point shooting spree from the Cardinals in the first round, they likely get a matchup with Michigan State, which matches up really well for them. If we go look at the offensive rating, defensive rating, you get USF, UCLA, Texas Tech, a whole bunch of teams, Tennessee, VCU. They're very similar teams to Michigan State. So this is a matchup that we can look at and say they play a similar style. All they have to do is mirror some of the games that Michigan State has struggled in. They just lost UCLA, just lost to Michigan. This is a Michigan State team that has not ended the season on a high note like Coach Izzo wants them to, but of course, you can't doubt Coach Izzo in March. Michigan State is always one of the few Big Ten teams that seems to have success in this tournament. Then we get to UCLA, UCF. One of those games that one of those teams I was just talking about. I was really high on UCLA in the Big Ten tournament. They ended up making a nice run, just as I predicted. I really like this team. Now, they are missing Tyler Bilodeau, and whether or not he's going to be coming back, whether or not Donovan Dent's going to be coming back, it is something that you are going to be gambling with if you decide to pick UCLA. As you can see here, I am gambling on that happening. I am picking UCLA to go all the way to the Elite Eight and meet Duke. However, if this team is missing all their star players, as we could see, they weren't able to do enough against Purdue, and I doubt they'll be able to make a run. UCF is a tough team, but they don't have the talent. More importantly, they're down here. One of the worst defensive teams in this tournament. You have a really high-powered UCLA offense. It's a tough matchup for the Knights in round one. And then down here, I got UConn Furman. UConn's an extremely solid team. Ended the season, all their big games were against St. John's. They lost two of them, destroyed St. John's in one of them. As we can see, this team has not made a whole lot of sense this year. And they got a lot of seniors on this group. Alex Caravan is on there. They got a ton of great guards like Solo Ball, Terrace Reed. They got a fantastic lineup, tons of talent in this UConn team, but they've just been so inconsistent, I find it difficult to believe that they'll be making a run. If they do, congrats. You should probably pick UConn if you have faith in this team, but it's one of these groups that I could see having a slip up early if something falls apart in one of the early games. Moving on to the South. This is the chaos quadrant. This quadrant, I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen. Not that I have any idea what's going to happen on any of the quadrants, but my point is there's so many good teams right here, and they're all very dangerous. You have Florida, maybe the best team in the tournament. They, of course, won it all last year. Extremely talented team, played a really tough schedule in the SEC. But they have a tough matchup, whether it's Clemson or Iowa coming out. Those are two tough teams, and especially with Iowa, they have Bennett Sturts. If he can get hot, you can see him pushing the Hawkeyes into a run. I have Clemson here in this first one just because I believe Iowa kind of ended the season on a bit of a rough note, and Clemson's here. They're one of the better defensive teams in the tournament. Iowa plays so slow, and Clemson is at home when teams are playing slow against them. Clemson tries to slow teams down in the ACC, and I think Iowa's just a really good matchup for the Tigers. Moving down to Vanderbilt McNeese. Vanderbilt just made a run in the SEC tournament, lost in the final to Arkansas, but this is an extremely talented team. They have great forwards all over the floor, very deep, and they have a tough matchup against McNeese in the first round. If we go here towards the defensive percentages, we could see McNeese all the way over here with the best steal percentage in the tournament, and it's not particularly close. Up here with High Point and Iowa State are the next teams up there. Case in point, McNeese, they play this brand of basketball. We've seen this before. It hasn't always contributed to success in March. They're an extremely dangerous team. I like Vanderbilt in this matchup because Vanderbilt's one of those really physical teams, and they take care of the ball well. They're one of those teams that I think could just out-talent McNeese, and they play such a fast pace. I think it's a tough matchup. Then we have this Nebraska-Troy matchup. All of these 5-12, 4-13s are really interesting. Nebraska, of course, struggled towards the end of their season, but we know how Coach Hoiberg has them. There's the surprise of this season. Now, can they get that elusive first win in this tournament? In this bracket, I'm picking Troy. In my other brackets, I'm picking Nebraska. Troy won their conference tournament. They're red hot. They shoot the ball really well. They play some strong defense. They like to turn over their opponents. They're just a tough matchup for Nebraska. It would be a fun upset pick because I would have Vanderbilt over Nebraska anyways. So it's debating how much your bracket style is and whether you want to get points for the upset or not. I'm going to pick Troy in this one. Moving down, we got another interesting set between an ACC team and the A10 champions and VCU. UNC, of course, missing their top player, and VCU has been red hot to end this season. I got them moving on. We got Illinois and Penn. This one's really interesting. We got a Fran McCaffrey Penn team that is shooting the ball like crazy. We, of course, have that TJ Power 44-point game in the finals to win them the Ivy League title game. But if you're going to try and get into a shooting match with somebody, don't do it against Illinois. We can go over here to the offensive and defensive adjusted ratings. Illinois, the best offense in the country. And if you're going to try and outshoot anybody, it's going to be tough to do it against an Illinois team that is so talented all the way around. Moving down here to St. Mary's, Texas A&M. This is one of those games, it's a 7-10 game, it's supposed to be close, and I've picked St. Mary's in every single one of my brackets. I'm really confident that this team is a little underrated. They got a couple of big wins this season. Got a couple of really nice ones over Gonzaga, who I'm really confident in is a strong team. And Texas A&M, I think, is a little overrated. A lot of the metrics don't really love them. As we can see down here, along with like teams like BYU and Indiana, they have solid overall metrics. When we look at some of the things like the rebounding, the defense, a little weaker defensive team, and then you have a St. Mary's team that is simply one of the best defensive teams in the country. They rebound so well. They're so big. They're so experienced. It's just a tough matchup for Texas A&M. And then moving on to Houston versus Idaho. Houston's one of the best all-around teams in the country. As always, one of the best defensive teams in the country. They were just in the national title game last year. There's absolutely no reason to think that Houston can't make a run again in 2026. Moving on to the right side of the bracket. Got Arizona against Long Island. I'm really confident that Arizona can make a run. In this one, I'm predicting them to get upset, but I'm really confident that this team is really good. They have everything they need to come out of this quadrant and go to the Final Four. It's just a question of whether they can maintain that longevity. So the team that started the season so hot is a team that has had really good play at times this season, but at times it's been a little inconsistent. And yes, they've played some really tough defenses in the Big 12. I think it'll either take a really hot shooting team or a really grindy defensive team to beat them. And it's tough because you got teams like Villanova, Utah State, Wisconsin, and Arkansas all right up there that all fit those molds. You got that Utah State team that is so solid defensively. They're really underrated up here with Virginia, Louisville, Santa Clara, Miami, Florida, all the way up there in that quadrant of top teams in college basketball. One of the most solid teams in terms of size and depth. Utah State is really underrated, and I'm actually kind of upset that they got a 9 seed because I was planning on picking Utah State to make a bit of a run if they got a 7. Imagine if Miami got a 9 and Utah State got a 7, how differently this quadrant would feel. But unfortunately for Utah State, if they beat Villanova, they'll have to take on a likely Arizona in the round of 32. This Wisconsin High Point game is one of the more intriguing ones of the entire tournament. I already mentioned how good High Point is on defense, second in the tournament in terms of steal percentage. They play a lightning fast brand of transition basketball. They shoot the ball really well, but the key is that Wisconsin attempts threes like crazy. Third most out of any team in this tournament. If High Point is going to win, they're going to have to force those turnovers, keep Wisconsin out of their comfort zone, because this is a High Point team that does not shoot threes at that same level. Nobody does, as you can see. Wisconsin's been really streaky at times this year. We've seen them knock off some of the top teams in the country, got huge wins at Michigan, at Illinois, wins versus Michigan State, Purdue, at Illinois again. They have some huge wins, but they also have some ugly losses at BYU and a big loss against Purdue earlier in the year. They've been inconsistent. And so I'm going to love High Point. I think this is one of my favorite 5-12 matchups in terms of getting this upset. I think we have some really strong 5 seeds like St. John's. And we got Vanderbilt over here that I'm predicting to go all the way. As we can see, Texas Tech, I'll talk about later. Texas Tech is probably the best 3-point shooting team in the country. And so there are some really strong 5 seeds this season. I think if you're wanting to pick a 12 seed, this Wisconsin game is probably the best bet for an upset. I'll of course say that, and then you watch, it'll be the only 5 seed that wins. But it's so unpredictable with these 5-12 games. This one just screams like a strong upset to me. Then we got Arkansas, Hawaii. Hawaii is an interesting team because in terms of the win-loss record, they look really nice. And then you look at the metrics and they just don't stick out in any way. They're an extremely strong defensive team, but they're one of the worst offensive teams in this tournament. And you're matching them up against an Arkansas team that just won the SEC. Malik Thomas is one of the best young freshmen in the game. And they're simply one of the best offensive teams in the country. And they're both red hot. And this is just going to be a really interesting matchup. It's tough for Hawaii because Arkansas is so talented. Coach Cal has them absolutely buzzing. And I know Coach Cal struggled in the tournament at times at Kentucky. This is still one of the best minds in the game. And he's not going to be able to get pushed out this early with this talented of an Arkansas team. Then we got BYU versus either Texas or North Carolina State. And let me talk about this Texas NC State game first, because I think this is the most interesting first 4 game. You have an NC State team. They're actually right here under Ohio State and Wisconsin. That they're very good on offense. The defense has been very inconsistent at times. At times, it's shown out, and they've won huge games against Louisville, UNC. And at other times, it's just been straight garbage, and they've definitely lost some games that they shouldn't. And then you got a Texas team that is just kind of mediocre overall. I believe they're right here in this clump with Oklahoma. As you can see, NC State and Texas very similar in terms of the offensive and defensive ratings, and this is a good matchup for NC State. Because if we're talking about teams that they've had success against, NC State has had success against teams that have struggled on defense and have allowed them to get their easy shots. Texas is one of the worst defensive teams in this tournament, and they've really struggled at times in the SEC. If we look at this 2.3 point percentage chart, NC State is one of the most efficient shooting teams in the country from beyond the arc. There's few teams that shoot better than them and are as reserved at taking them. They just do a really good job of picking their spots, and when other teams are lazy on defense, NC State will carve you up and slice you from deep all game long. Then you look at Texas, who's really mediocre in the shooting department. Right in the middle here with Baylor, UNI, Minnesota. And this is a team that really does not have the juice from deep to match up with a good shooting team like NC State. I think this is a really good matchup for NC State. And they're a team that I could think matches up really well against BYU, who they'd be playing if they beat Texas, because BYU is so similar to Texas, maybe just with the exception of a high-flying AJ Dybantsa. And if they can guard Dybantsa, if they can figure out how to keep him from putting up 25, 30 points on them, I think NC State could be a dark horse to make a run in this tournament from the 11 line. In my chaos bracket, which I might show you guys later, I have NC State making a run to the Elite Eight. Here, I have Gonzaga over Kennesaw State, and you have one of the best defensive teams in the country. In fact, they are the best defensive team in the country. If we go back over to our offensive-defensive rating, you have Gonzaga all the way at the top, number one. Of course, they're right up there, always in the trapezoid of excellence. If you've watched Trapezoid of Excellence and you know what I'm talking about, Gonzaga is always right there. Always one of the most consistently all-around solid teams. Mark Few has this team rolling, just won their conference title game. This is a dangerous Gonzaga team, and things worked out really well for them to make a run, because if they end up playing NC State, that's a team that has struggled against great defense, which Gonzaga has great defense. And if they play either Texas or BYU, those are both teams who can't really light it up from downtown, and that Gonzaga might be able to grind out and get wins. I think Gonzaga is one of the best bets to make the Elite Eight out of anybody in the tournament, just because of the matchups set up for them. And if we're talking about another team that's really set up to go to the Elite Eight, you got to talk about Purdue. Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, you got Trey Kaufman-Renn. You have an absolutely stacked lineup of experienced players that have been with each other for a long time, and they're just so talented. We saw what they did in the Big Ten tournament. I predicted them to lose their first game of the Big Ten tournament. No, they went all the way, and they continue to surprise. They're one of the few teams that always seems to do something late in the year in some of those big games. Yes, we know of Purdue's issues in March Madness, but this is such a great draw for them. Getting Queens, the worst defensive team in the tournament in March, in the first round, and then they get to play the winner of Miami and Missouri. You have a Miami team that is overall kind of solid, and you have a Missouri team that just really doesn't have too much business being in this tournament. I think they're one of the more overrated teams in the country. The metrics just think they're mediocre on offense, not great in defense. You have a Miami team that's up here in the quadrants with Michigan State, Tennessee, VCU, USF, Iowa, Utah State. This is a really solid Miami team. In my chaos bracket, I have Miami making a run, beating Purdue, beating Gonzaga. I have them going all the way to the Elite Eight. So this is a really solid Miami team if they can shoot the ball well and if they can stay physical, because it's a team that loves to just bully you. They've done it in the ACC at times this season, but in March, if you get to a hot shooting team like Purdue can be at times, it's really tough to stay physical. If Purdue is off their A game and they miss some shots, Miami could be a team to make a run, and I really like how they play. Let's move down to our final quadrant here. We got Michigan against the winner of UMBC versus Howard. UMBC is actually a solid team. I'm a little surprised they didn't get up to like a 15 seed or even a 14, but we have a lot of really good teams winning their conference tournaments this year. I would predict UMBC to win that first round game, but I don't think it matters. Michigan is one of the best teams in the country. Yes, they've struggled a little bit here. They've battled through some injuries. But yeah, they went to the Big Ten final. Yaxel Landenborg is an absolute beast. He's an NBA lottery pick. This is one of the better teams in the country. However, this is definitely the weakest 1 seed. I would argue that there's several 2 seeds that would beat Michigan on a neutral site, and if that's the case, then they match up against a 8-9 game where I have St. Louis going every single time in my brackets. I think Georgia's a little bit of an overrated team. They have a solid offense. They're in the same realm as Miami, Vanderbilt, Santa Clara. They're an interesting team, but they folded at times against elite shooting teams. And you have one of the best all-around teams in St. Louis, really underrated. Team that didn't win their conference tournament on a crazy fluky play. And this is a team that is absolutely elite at shooting the rock. The best three-point percentage in the tournament. If this team gets hot, Robbie Avila, they have an elite center there who can distribute the ball from the middle and is a great passer, great all-around shooter. This is a team that is absolutely more dangerous than any other team in March. They are the classic mid-major shooting team that can light you up from deep, and if they get hot, they are so dangerous. The key with them is that at times they've missed some shots, and they've been inconsistent. We saw it in the tournament against Dayton. And how that this team can, if Trey Green, Robbie Avila, if they can't get it done, they don't have the depth that some of these other teams have. But absolutely, they're an elite shooting team, and they're the exact kind of team that I would expect to be dangerous for a team like Michigan. In this bracket, I have them beating the 1 seed. And then down here we got Texas Tech and Akron. And I love Akron, but this is a really tough matchup for them because you have arguably the best three-point shooting team in the country. But they have some injuries. JT Toppin, of course, has been out. They have some other stuff going on, and it creates some really interesting things with this team because can their backups push them? Can their backups step up and make the necessary shots? Christian Anderson, he's got a whopping almost 40 minutes, almost 20 points per game. He's expected to play, but they really need him. He didn't play in the Big 12 tournament. It really sucked the life out of this Texas Tech team. If he comes back, if you're betting on him to come back, you are picking Texas Tech to make a run. Because if he's there, this is one of the most fun, dangerous, great shooting, great defense teams in the tournament. I love Texas Tech. I've been waiting to pick them in the tournament all year, but things have kind of set up oddly for them, and it's just a little frustrating. If I'm a Texas Tech fan, I'm so frustrated and annoyed with how things have worked out with the injuries and now the draw, because if we win, we likely have to play either Alabama or Hofstra. Hofstra is just one of the quickest, best guard play teams in the country. Some mid-major guys that just get to the rack, shoot some threes, so shifty. Really good guard play from Hofstra. And for Alabama, they just had one of their star players, Aiden Holloway, get arrested for marijuana, and he's going to likely be out for the tournament. And so this is an Alabama team that shoots more threes than anybody, and now one of their best shooters is going to be out for the tournament. So if you're going to try and pick a plucky, guard-heavy Cruz Davis, Preston Edmond team out of the mid-major conference, this could be a strong upset bid to do it for Hofstra. And then if you like Texas Tech, or if you like Hofstra, you could pick either one of those teams to move on and face a potential Michigan, St. Louis, Georgia, whoever you have coming out of there. This top part of this quadrant is so much fun. It's so chaotic. Any team could come out of there. I have St. Louis coming out of there at a 9 seed right now, and I could totally either see Hofstra, Alabama, Texas Tech, even Akron, if they get hot as they did in their conference tournament in the MAC. So many fun teams up here. Just enjoy whoever you pick in here. This is just pure confidence in whoever you think is going to have their players and be able to execute. St. Louis has their guys. They're all healthy. They have a strong shooting team. That's the reason I'm picking them. Down here, you got Tennessee and the winner of Miami, Ohio, and SMU. That Miami, Ohio, SMU game is going to be a lot of fun. Of course, Miami, Ohio is known for their long run and then losing in their conference tournament 31-1. The interesting thing with Miami, Ohio, they have the highest 2-point percentage out of anybody in the tournament, and they have a decently high 3-point percentage. They're a really strong shooting team, but the defense has been hit or miss. They don't have the size to contend with some of the top teams out of power conferences. And while I do think they'll be able to take care of business against SMU, a team that's shooting percentages are still pretty high and made some noise in the ACC this season, I'm not sure SMU is as consistent in terms of going about their offense. And I think Miami, Ohio is still brimming with confidence coming off of such a good season. Here's the thing, is if we go to the rebounding for the next thing, we have Tennessee, by far and away the best offensive rebounding team in the country. And so it's just really tough if you're a Miami, Ohio, who's one of the worst offensive rebounding teams in the tournament this year. And even if you're an SMU team, they're in this wash somewhere. They're over here. One of the worst defensive rebounding teams in the tournament and a middling offensive rebound team. The key is Tennessee is licking their chops for either one of them. Because if Miami, Ohio beats SMU, you have a power conference Tennessee team who just crashes the boards on offense and gets all those putbacks, who can grind out an easy win against Miami and just bully them with their talent and size. And if it's an SMU team, you know that the SMU wants to shoot the lights out, and they're not really good enough shooters to do it. So I would trust Tennessee to win in either one of these matchups. And then if you have Virginia in the next round, it's another good matchup for Tennessee because you have a Virginia team that really relies on their offensive rebounding as well, but they're just way worse at doing it than Tennessee. So you have two weak shooting teams in Virginia and Tennessee here. Virginia has played in a little bit of the softer conference this year in the ACC, at least the less deep conference, the ACC. And their big games, Virginia did not really dominate them as Tennessee did at times. I really like Tennessee coming out of this and going to the Sweet 16. And then we have this Kentucky-Santa Clara matchup, one of the more interesting games of the first round. You have a really all-around solid Kentucky team. We know how talented they are. They have Otega Owa, Denzel Aberdeen, a bunch of really talented big forwards. But this Santa Clara team is really, really dangerous. Mark Pope is going to have their hands full. This Santa Clara lost the conference tournament championship to Gonzaga, beat St. Mary's on the road, beat St. Mary's twice, beat McNeese, and was really tough against St. Louis and Gonzaga. This is a really dangerous team, and if we go to our overall offensive defensive ratings, you can see why. This team is right up there with the likes of Utah State, Louisville, Virginia, Miami, Ohio, Georgia. This is a really solid all-around team. They don't have a ton of weaknesses, and that leads me to believe that they can be an upset contender if they just continue to stay hot from beyond the arc, and that's exactly what they've been doing the last few weeks. And then finally, down at the bottom, I get to talk about Iowa State, Tennessee State. Tennessee State's interesting because they've really tried to force a bunch of turnovers. They're one of the better steal teams in the league. But if we look at our 3-point and 2-point percentage rating here, it's tough because Iowa State's one of the most efficient shooting teams in the country. They also rebound very well. They're physical. If we go to the rebounding here, Iowa State's right up there in this right quadrant. They do a strong job on the glass. And most importantly with Iowa State, they're right up here. They're a dominant force in the trapezoid of excellence. They follow all the metrics. They've dominated at times in the Big 12 this season. They have their entire team healthy. The coaching is there. This is an all-around dominant team. They have Milan Momcilovic, who's the best shooter in the country, period. Most threes, best 3-point percentage. He's so much fun. He's the exact kind of player you need to lead a top squad in March. Iowa State plays aggressive defense. They have a bunch of transfers who have come together and have gelled in a big way. Now, they have one concern here, and this is it right here, is that they have struggled in their big games at the end of the season. Yes, they almost beat Arizona in their conference tournament. They came up that close. This is still an extremely dangerous team. But here's the thing. They have two things that work in March, and it's their defense, and it's their shooting, their guard play. They have a whole bunch of ways of scoring. Now, at the same time, they can bog down at times, and they can slow down. The big issue with this Iowa State team is that the passing isn't elite. It's just solid. And I would like to believe that the struggles and inconsistency on offense is just because they were playing consistently against some of the most physical, best defensive teams in the Big 12 all season. You put them in March against a whole bunch of different opponents from different conferences. I think this team can regain their confidence, get their mojo back. And this is a team that has a bracket and a quadrant set up to make a long run. And as you can see here, I have them facing a 15 seed, a 10 seed, a 6 seed, and a 9 seed en route to the Final Four, where they play a 4 seed. I don't have them playing a top 3 seed until the national championship game, where I have them beating Duke. This is an extremely talented Iowa State team. I have them winning it all in this bracket. Let me show you some of my other brackets. I have my chaos bracket here, which I have St. Louis winning it all, which is just a ton of fun. A Final Four of TCU, VCU, Utah State, and St. Louis. Just a ton of fun. All of my favorite upset teams like St. Louis, Santa Clara, VCU, McNeese, TCU, USF, Miami, Utah State. Those are some of my favorite teams in terms of picking upsets in this bracket. And then my chalky bracket, of course, having Duke winning it all, going on their run to the Final Four here, beating teams like Ohio State, Kansas, UCLA. I have Gonzaga beating out Arizona to go to the Final Four on this side, to play, of course, Iowa State. Then I have Houston going and beating Florida in this quadrant and losing to Duke, and Duke winning it all. If you're wanting to just pick the favorites, I think you couldn't go wrong with these 4 right here. These are probably my favorite 4 teams in the entire tournament in terms of teams that I think could go on a run and teams that I think are the best in their quadrants. I think Duke, Houston, Gonzaga, and Iowa State are my favorite picks to go to the Final Four, completely ignoring matchups and completely ignoring all other factors. I think those are my favorite 4 teams in the country after watching a bunch of college basketball this season. And of course, I have Duke winning it all. It's really tough to envision them actually losing a big, meaningful game because every big game this season, they've handled it in the right ways and they've gone out there and dominated. So that's my bracket. I hope you all enjoyed and learned something. Don't pick exactly what I picked. Do your own thing. Have some fun with it. It's the best week of sports in the entire season. It's March Madness. See you all next week. Thanks for joining me on the Analytical Lion.